I'm reading A Planned Deception by Constance Cumbey. This is chapter 12. Were these Christians misunderstood? Perhaps the greatest source of criticism I received for The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow centered about my chapter, Deluded or Deceivers. There I attempted to point out just a tiny sampling of what seemed to be blatant New Age propagandizing of Christians. The criticism did not take me by surprise. I anticipated there would be a furor. I knew that these positions had not become entrenched philosophically and academically without having their defenders. Many people expressed surprise that I had taken this stand. Why did I risk the unpleasant controversy? I felt for many reasons that this was perhaps the most important chapter within Hidden Dangers. My original intent in writing it was to show a little of the mounting evidence that the apostasy of 2 Thessalonians was at hand. I entitled my original draft, Come Out of Her, My People, the Growing Apostasy of American Religious Life. Little did I know at that stage of my writing that I was looking at anything larger. The subtler versions of this bothered me so much, or more. It was those books I felt that would most likely reach evangelical Christians. There they would unknowingly receive occult goals. While the average Christian might see through We by Matthew Fox or When Gods Change by Charles McCoy, they might not appreciate that Ron Sider's books were taking them to the same political place. One of the primary aims of the movement was clearly a New World religion. Jesus said there would be deception enough to deceive even the elect. Thus I felt it even more important to point out the subtle than the obvious. One reason I continued to press forward despite the controversy was that the average Christian was not acquainted with esoteric lore. Certainly before I began my investigation of this, I had been ignorant of it. Short of divine intervention, they are unlikely to know that perhaps some Sunday school materials are very much like those openly labeled New Age. I was also motivated by Jesus' instruction that there would be deception enough to deceive even the elect. Could Benjamin Creme deceive the average Christian? The chances are excellent that he could not. If he walked up to the average Joe or Mary Christian and said, "Follow me in my Maitreya the Christ," chances are excellent they would tell him to get out of their face. However, if somebody would come along with the same political agenda as Benjamin Creme, as the evangelical books advocating the New World Order undisputedly do, and said, "Praise the Lord, brother, do I love Jesus, and now in the name of Jesus, let's establish the New World Order, and we'll remember to give God all the glory." An average Christian, unless forewarned, might accept it. Pause. That's the Seven Mountain Mandate right there. Yes, that's what it is. Let's establish the New World Order. They just changed it into Seven Mountain Mandate and Dominionism. It's the same thing. Unpause. The average Christian, unless forewarned, might accept it. I had read the books and was familiar with the underlying literature that the Christian writers cited. I knew those references were not Christian. Therefore, if their authors had been bold enough to knowingly poison the Christian well, then I would be bold enough to point out the un-Christian and even vitriolically anti-Christian nature of their sources. Pause. This video series could be read at any time in the future or listened to, but at this point I'm doing a series on Satan's Little Season, and that is exactly why I'm doing it. Because I believe there are anti-Christian nature of their sources, the roots of it, the Gnostic New Age roots of it. Not the Bible verses they use, which I don't agree with their conclusion, but all the underlying conspiracy stuff that is very New Age is part of it. It's all mixed together. I'm going to read that again. I'm sorry. Therefore, if their authors had not been had been bold enough to knowingly poison the Christian well, then I would be bold enough to point out the unchristian and even vitriolically anti-Christian nature of their sources. In some cases, I did not have the benefit of their bibliographies, but I felt it was stretching the limits of credibility to suggest that the blatant parallels to the New Age and humanist materials had been coincidental. This chapter will discuss some of those that I took the most fire for questioning. Ronald J. Sider. After Sider and his friends in the Christian media claimed he had been misunderstood, Ron Sider prepared a revised and expanded edition of his InterVarsity published Rich Christians in an Age of Hunger. Theoretically, he would have toned down any content that people felt could be construed as New Age. Logically, he should have, because he knew there were those in agreement with my analysis of his work. This did not happen. Instead, the content of his revised and expanded version was unmistakably New Age, both as to tone and recommended sources. The new Rich Christians in an Age of Hunger endorsed the World Watch Institute, headed by New Ager and Humanist Manifesto signer Lester Brown, a Catholic New World Order-oriented group. Network, page 232. Lucis Trust, Planetary Initiative Cooperating Amnesty International, page 231. The National Council of Churches, Church World Service, page 231. And Robert Mueller directed United Nations agencies, including the FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization, which calls for the creation of a World Food Authority. CESI, known as publishes UN Development Forum, the Center for Economic and Social Information. It publishes the UN Development Forum. And Gerald and Patricia Mish's pivotal New Age book, Towards a Human World Order. A work complete with everything including the New World Order, the New World Religion, and on page 24, advocacy of a whole earth personal identity system. A whole earth personal identity system. Wow. I think even Donald Trump is in favor of that. Isn't that weird? Okay. Tom Sine and publisher Word Books have denied with equal vehemence any possibility of New Age influence. They point out proudly that he is the member of a Seattle Presbyterian congregation, University Presbyterian Church. The pastor of that church himself has been openly involved with New Age centers such as the Esalen Institute at Big Sur, California. Esalen proudly fosters witchcraft, spiritual channeling. Seminars are actually held with the nine, in quotation marks, the nine, sexual looseness, and nearly every other form of spiritual abomination. Esalen is absolutely no place for a Christian who wishes to remain a Christian. The fact that Sine willingly sits under a shepherd who himself has openly flaunted religious orthodoxy does little to convince me of Sine's orthodoxy. Sine has been published in New Age magazines. His article, Bringing Down the Final Curtain, appeared in the Utne Reader in fall of 1984. It had originally appeared in Sojourners. It was a vicious attack on fundamentalists who believe that we are in the last days. He characterized those beliefs as dangerous. He said that the vision itself of an apocalyptic end was exactly the catalyst that could bring such an end about. He also said that God intends to bring into existence a new age of peace in which the weapons of warfare and violence are transformed into instruments of peace. Not surprisingly, this and other statements in his article received New Age raves of approval. The Utne Reader is published by Eric Utne, the founder of New Age Journal. Reading that article by Sign, I was reminded of a passage in Peter. Knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lusts, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. 2 Peter 3 and 4. I spoke twice in the past year to a full gospel businessmen's group at South Whidbey Island near Seattle. Both times there was a heavy New Age attendance. An island professional and his wife present at my April 1984 meeting questioned me closely. He said he was there representing World Concern, capitalized World Concern, and was a friend of Tom Sign's. When he asked me publicly what was wrong with Tom Sign, and I gave my documentation, he grew strangely silent. His wife had earlier challenged a statement I made because she believed David Spangler to be an only child. After the evening's talk was over, I was besieged by FGBMF members who told me the couple had openly recommended David Spangler, Chinook Learning Community, and Findhorn, that's like a New Age center. David Spangler was part of that. That was mentioned earlier. Sorry, unpause. This combined with Sign's references in the Mustard Seed Conspiracy to William Irwin Thompson's Evil and World Order, a book in essence about Findhorn and the New Age movement, convinces me that Sign is not and cannot be innocent of the New Age movement's existence, since he says he is also a member of the World Future Society. The World Future Society. Okay, that's like Barbara Marx Hubbard, who says that we are the riders of the pale horse, death, and then we're going to take out a quarter of humanity. That Barbara Marx Hubbard? Okay. Unpause. Sorry, I know I say unpause a lot more than I have said pause. In his on first name basis with William Irwin Thompson, Hazel Henderson, Willis Harman, and other New Agers of distinction, again, and his books advocate their programs, I fail to see just how he can plead innocence with a straight face. David Bryant. David Bryant and his friends claimed I had misunderstood the intent of the first edition of Standing in the Gap, what it means to be a world Christian. Since I am not infallible, that remained a possibility. David Bryant has since twice revised his book and written another, Concerts of Prayer. As of the second revising of Standing in the Gap, I am convinced I did not mistake his intent. Most who follow the progress of the New World Order proponents are unfamiliar with the Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions. It has drawn up proposed new world constitutions and helped develop sophisticated rationales for scrapping the present nation-state system. Pause. Is this sounding familiar at all today in 2024 on either side, including Project 2025? Sorry. Nevertheless, Bryant recommends them as resources for missionary trainees. So are the materials of the World Future Society and Amnesty International, organizations which last year held new group of world servers forums for Lucius Trust. Tom Sign's The Mustard Seed Conspiracy. I'm sorry, I have to pause. Again. This might not have anything to do with it, but I did a series about Moravian Falls and Zinzendorf and his mustard seed brotherhood, Masonic Order of the Mustard Seed. Just wondering if that's, I don't know. I haven't looked into it. It just seems interesting. On pause. The Mustard Seed Conspiracy and Ron Sider's Rich Christians in an Age of Hunger are recommended as well. The self-confessed New Age guru John Naisbitt's Megatrends was recommended, as was Aspen Institute's Daniel Yankelovich's book, New Rules, now part of the Bantam Books New Age series. Unfortunately, more than one evangelical has made this mistake. Even the National Council of Churches passed Bryant's scrutiny. I was surprised to note that Bryant had recommended the Pergamon Press, although it was misspelled Pergarnon Press in Bryant's book. There was no mistake as to address. Maxwell House, Fairview Park, Elmsford, New York, 10524. This is a well-known New Age organization and publishing house. Some of their published titles include Ariello, I'm not going to say any of these names right. Ariello Pecci, founder, Club of Rome, The Human Quality. Irvin Laszlo, The Inner Limits of Mankind, Heretical Reflections on Today's Values, Culture, and Politics. Irvin Laszlo, The Objectives of the New International Economic Order. Eric Damon, The Future in Our Hands. Marilyn Ferguson said in her Aquarian Conspiracy that this was one of the most important catalyzing books to European New Agers. An interesting comparison. In The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow, I quoted a passage entitled A Parable from Bryant's book. That passage read as follows, quote, A parable, imagine for a moment that, as long as you can remember, you've been seated in a darkened theater, alone. Okay, pause. I'm just pausing again. Imagine that you've been sitting alone in a darkened theater and you don't know anything. It's all a mystery. It's all lies. Whatever. Okay, sorry, unpause. Well, not completely alone. You've noted other shadows brooding in the dimness. Some have even mumbled their names to you. But the chill, the mystery, the emptiness of perpetual night, that's been the extent of your life. Until now, that is. Pause again. I haven't read this. Maybe it's about some kind of awakening? Maybe? Let's see. Imagine that one day a spotlight bursts its brilliance across the distant stage. Light. At first it startles you, then it intrigues you. You sit and stare. Gradually your eyes focus. Now you're aware that a man has stepped into the spotlight. How unusual he is. He's laughing, dancing, and singing. In time you notice that others are up there too, dancing with the man in the light, happy and free like he is. Unquote. In The Hidden Dangers, I had observed that the balance of the passage contained white light imagery and sounded far more like Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh talk to occult initiates than a serious call to potential Christian missionaries. However, even this seemingly harsh statement is far too mild. Nearly identical material appeared in Findhorn's On Earth magazine. When you hear Findhorn, it's a big New Age center and publisher. Okay. In Findhorn's On Earth magazine, volume 2 of summer 1976, written by English scientist occultist R. Ogilvy Crombie. It was dated well in advance of the 1979 publication of In the Gap. Crombie was a dedicated patron of the Findhorn Foundation. He thought he frequently communed with nature spirits. He certainly was communing with something. One day, something introduced himself as the devil. In another conversation with this entity, who also called himself Pan, it said, quote, "All right, I'll do my best by an analogy. Imagine a theater with a large stage. The stage is in darkness. It is thronged with people, but you cannot see them because of the darkness, which symbolizes your lack of sensitivity. A narrow beam spotlight pricks out one of them, and he immediately becomes visible to you. Any number of different individuals can be picked out and become visible in this way. Similarly, lights could pick out a group, or the whole stage could be lit. The light symbolizes your heightened senses. It is a rough analogy, but it may answer your question. Unquote. So that was a quote by somebody who was like being the devil. So that's how he talks. I'm just saying, like, I don't think a lot of Christians really understand that that's the kind of things that he says. Okay? Unpause. An actor on the stage. Symbolism. Analogies of an actor on the stage are common among occult initiates. They are much older than the ROC's conversation with Pan. As a matter of fact, the 1914 issue of The Theosophist carried a similar analogy. In 1914, the Theosophical Society was, as are the occultists of today, engaged in preparing the world to receive their New Age Christ. In 1914, the occultists centered their energies about Krishnamurti, who was slated to become Maitreya the Christ. An article appearing in that magazine entitled "Why the World Does Not Understand" made it clear that what Theosophy was really all about was preparing the world to receive a myth, that the underlying actor was always the same. The author said, quote, "We are assisting at the preparations for the theatrical makeup of the Christ. To see a theatrical actor from nearby with his face completely plastered with rouge, powder, and lamp black is horrible, and yet the makeup is necessary in order that he may present himself before the footlights. The Christ will make himself up for the centuries to come. To us, his coryphees on the stage of the present, this will perhaps seem anti-ascetic and repugnant, because we shall not understand the necessity for it, and so much the less will the masses understand it, who through moving on the same stage do not take a direct part in the action. The spectators, that is the future generations, on the contrary, will be totally absorbed in the plot of the drama. And will see beauty and depth of expression in what to us seems ridiculous. For the moment, the drama which is about to conclude on the stage of the world, it is still that of some 2,000 years ago, and we scarcely yet understand its plot. The public no longer sees whether the makeup of the represented Christ is a falsification of paint and the play of lights. The actor prepares himself to represent another drama. He will always be the same, and the means for making himself up in a new aspect for a new part will also be the same. Occultists try and seek to serve the actor and do not pay any attention to the paint. The public is interested in the fate of Hamlet and Othello. It believes their adventures real. It follows them intensely. It hisses and it applauds. But he who has donned the costumes of Hamlet and Othello is not only an actor, but a man who recites in order to move the simple public or to make it laugh, who has a home and lives quite a distance from the theater. Let us see to it that he shall obtain a success at the next representation. The public will perhaps applaud the interpreting hero. We shall count on the affection of the artist." Unquote. An interesting comparison is the 1914 Theosophical article Les Measures, the Armageddon Script, and Bryant's Man on the Stage. As Jesus said, there would be deception enough to deceive even the elect. World Vision. Another person I allegedly misunderstood was W. Stanley Mooneyham, the former president of World Vision. When I wrote The Hidden Dangers, I had not completed Mooneyham's What Do You Say to a Hungry World? Had I done so, I would have been even more critical than I had been. The reader should note the following. Number one, Mooneyham repeatedly urges people to become change agents. Change agents! See page 24 in 115 of What Do You Say to a Hungry World. Number two, he called for an international Joseph with an international plan on page 172 and 173 of What Do You Say to a Hungry World. Quote, having seen the world at the brink of famine and still standing only a few inches away, an increasing number of voices are joining in a call for a Joseph. It was this far-sighted prime minister of ancient Egypt who planned and administered the world's most famous food stockpile. About the only voices which haven't joined in the call for a food stockpiling system today are the commodity future speculators and members of the Farm Bureau. Recent years have taught us a great deal, and one of the things is that no one nation can carry the burden of feeding the world, just as the US dollar can no longer serve as the found action of an international monetary system. Pause, very relevant again today, 40 years later. Anyway, unpause. So US agriculture may no longer have sufficient excess capacity to ensure reasonable stability in the world food economy. Thus, the need today is for an international Joseph with an international plan. Number three, he repeatedly cited open New Agers Lester Brown, E.F. Schumacher, Francis Lappy, Richard J. Barnett, a Lindisfarne Fellow, Club of Rome, Theodore Hesburgh, Alvin Toffler, Paul Ehrlich, Robert Heilbronner, and Gandhi. 4. Standard occult arguments for population control employed on pages 43, 243, 257, 263. 5. Utilizes vocabulary of New Age movement, interdependence, celebration, process, turn inward, change agents, global village, fourth world, global wholeness. Number 6. Visualization references. Number 7, obviously favors abortion, sterilization, and birth control. Quote, given present growth trends, should Americans limit their present families to 2 children? Would that make any difference to the rest of the world? To the USA of the future, if family limitation seems desirable, what will this mean to our views on sterilization, abortion, and birth control? Unquote. Number 8, Mooneyham favors a one-world government. On page 215 of What Do You Say to a Hungry World, he quotes Julius Nyerere of Tanzania with approval. I'm sorry, I said it wrong. Quote, unfortunately, there is no world government which would tax the rich nations for the benefit of the poor nations. There is no international equivalent of social security payments. Instead, we have an acknowledgement of the need for international aid. Unquote. And 9. Similarly to the Alice Bailey books and Tibetan predictions, Mooneyham recommends a turning inward combined with revolutionary changes in the present world order. He approvingly quotes Mahbub ul Haq, a senior economic advisor at the World Bank, as follows. Quote, the developing countries have no choice but to turn inwards, much the same as communist China, and to adopt a different style of life, seeking a consumption pattern more consistent with their own poverty, pots and pans, and bicycles, and simple consumption habits, without being seduced by the lifestyles of the rich. This requires a redefinition of economic and social objectives, which is of truly staggering proportions. A liquidation of the privileged groups and vested interests, which may well be impossible in many societies, a redistribution of political economic power, which may only be achieved through revolutions rather than through an evolutionary change. This is strong medicine, but he is not the only one prescribing it." Unquote. Ted Engstrom. Nor has World Vision been free of problems under Mooneyham's successor, Ted Engstrom. He enthusiastically recommends Dennis Waitley's scarcely veiled New Age philosophical mind control books, even though those books openly recommend the works of Marilyn Ferguson. How is one to blame Marilyn Ferguson when she receives imprimaturs from such prominent personalities in the Christian world? Georgy Lozanov, Ernest Holmes, and a host of other influential New Agers, and he did so well after the storm broke over the New Age movement. He also, as do all too many others, recommends the works of self-confessed New Age guru John Naisbitt. World Vision Vice President Ed Dayton praises the Ferguson books, and in a footnoted statement to one of his books that would even make a better informed Marilyn Ferguson smile in amusement, he proclaims that certain evangelical writers are in error when they connect Marilyn Ferguson with the New Age movement. I guess he was talking about Constance. World Vision of Europe has apparently affiliated itself with New Age organization Tranet. Only member organizations are permitted to advertise in their publications, and World Vision of Europe does. Tranet is a quarterly newsletter directory distributed regularly only to members. It describes itself as a quarterly newsletter directory of, by, and for people who are participating in transformation. People who are changing the world by changing their own lives. People who are adopting alternative technologies. A recent issue carried the following announcement. Quote, "The World Vision of Europe Resource Directory is now available for $1 check. Jennifer Richty, World Vision of Europe, 146 Queen Victoria Street, London, blah, blah, blah. The directory lists important information available to anyone involved in development work in third world countries. 8 different sections cover all aspects of development, including agriculture, health, logistics, development, relief, disaster / refugees, water sanitation, recruitment orientation, and technology. Each may be ordered separately. Tranet describes itself as a quarterly newsletter directory of, by, and for people who are participating in transformation, people who are changing the world by changing their own lives, people who are adopting alternative technologies. This is not to single out Sign, Bryant, and Sider. What they are doing is not unusual. That is the evangelical tragedy." Now, this is very interesting. I know that for some of you, that none of these names are, I don't know all these people. This is 40 years ago, and it's advanced way, way, way beyond that to where we are now in every aspect. Here are the chapter notes. And the next chapter is about Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Thank you for watching or listening.
Run.
There's just one name that can keep you out of hell, and it's the name of Jesus. The name of Jesus. The name of Jesus.